Brandon Kingston hadn't planned to stop at the roadside diner. His Tesla was fully charged, and his calendar buzzed with meetings back to back. But something about the faded sign, the way the neon flickered "Diner" against the encroaching dusk, made him pull over. Nostalgia? Maybe. Fatigue? More likely. Or perhaps it was fate tightening its invisible noose. Inside, the diner was dimly lit, the air tinged with grease, old coffee, and something harder to name, regret, maybe. A far cry from the penthouses and Michelin star brunches he frequented. But there was something honest about the chipped counters and handwritten specials on the wall. He slid into a booth by the window and loosened his tie, scanning emails on his phone when a voice sliced through memory and time. "Coffee, sir." Brandon looked up, and froze. The woman holding the pot had tired eyes, her hair pulled back in a tight, no-nonsense bun. Her apron was stained, her posture wary. But her face, he knew that face. "Allison?" She blinked, visibly startled. "Brandon?" The years collapsed. Allison Young. The girl who once challenged him for every academic title at Hawthorne Prep. She was the only person who ever made him doubt he'd graduate valedictorian. Brilliant. Confident. Unstoppable. And yet here she was, refilling chipped mugs in a highway diner. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. What are you doing here?" he asked, voice lower, softer. She glanced over her shoulder before setting the coffee down and whispering, "I get off in 10. Don't leave." Then, subtly, she slid a folded napkin toward him. On it, one name scribbled in smudged pen ink, Darren Sharp. Brandon felt his heart stutter. Darren? That Darren? It couldn't be. But the name scratched across that napkin hit harder than any merger, any market crash. And something in Allison's eyes, something wounded but not broken, made him stay. 10 minutes felt like hours. Allison returned in silence, untying her apron and grabbing a coat from behind the counter. "Come with me," she said, without waiting for agreement. They walked down an alley beside the diner, toward a rust-red Toyota with a cracked rear window. She didn't offer him a seat inside, just leaned on the hood and looked up at the stars. "Start talking," Brandon said. "Because I have 1,000 questions and not enough words." She exhaled slowly. "You remember when I co-founded Clarityfolio?" He did. It was a media storm, an AI-powered finance platform promising to disrupt the old investment firms. Brandon had even attended one of their seed round events. Allison handled the tech. Darren, the charismatic, suited genius, was her business partner. The face of the brand. "We were everywhere," she said. "Forbes, TechCrunch, Wired. We had half the valley talking. And then, you disappeared." "No. I was erased." Her voice cracked on the last word. Allison unzipped her coat and pulled out an old, worn leather notebook. Inside were printed emails, handwritten notes, photocopies of wire transfers. Brandon skimmed them as she spoke. There were discrepancies, she explained. Tiny withdrawals labeled as consulting fees, routed through shell firms. I confronted Darren. He said it was investor-side structuring. I believed him, because I wanted to. But after the audit, her lips tightened. They froze our funding. Froze my accounts. I was named on everything. The press painted me as the greedy one. Darren went on a sympathy tour, called me unstable. He told people I was emotionally manipulative. That I'd sign things I didn't understand. Brandon shook his head slowly. And no one questioned it. They did, but only for a second. Then came the signatures. Fraudulent. Doctored. But mine. The media narrative was too juicy. White woman tanks tech unicorn. Black man escapes toxic partnership. No one looked deeper. And you think Darren forged your name? I know he did. But he didn't act alone. She flipped the page. See that transfer? She pointed. It's a 7-figure payout routed to an advisory firm. Look at the authorized signatory. Brandon's blood ran cold. He recognized the name. A man who had mentored him during his Series A round. A titan in the VC world. He backed both of us, Allison whispered. Helped launch Darren and me. And you. Think about it. Who benefits when the white female founder is vilified and the black male founder becomes a cautionary tale? Brandon felt the earth tilt beneath his feet. It wasn't just betrayal. It was engineered. Strategic. Weaponized. The car ride back to his penthouse was a blur. Brandon said little. His mind was a cacophony of conflicting memories, of private meetings with that same executive, of handshakes and assurances. Of a world he thought he had understood. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he stayed up reading every document Allison had shared. He called in a favor from his forensic team, asking them to quietly cross-reference transaction histories, email headers, and digital fingerprints. By morning, the foundation had started to crack. The transfers were real. The digital signatures were forged, sophisticated, but not invisible. The same IP address linked 3 of the most damning transactions. Brandon knew that address. It belonged to Darren's firm. But even more disturbing, 2 other names appeared buried in advisory logs and non-public cap tables. One belonged to a media consultant known for reputation management. The other? A political strategist with ties to several controversial think tanks. It wasn't just fraud. It was a takedown. Brandon sat back in his chair, dawn slicing through his high-rise windows, and whispered to himself, they assassinated her character. And the world let them. Brandon's legal team was hesitant at first. You're stepping into a mess that was buried years ago, warned Camille, his lead attorney. No one wants this resurrected. The firms involved have deep pockets, deeper connections, and no reason to play fair. I don't care, Brandon said, voice low but firm. I know Allison. She's not a thief. And if we let this stand, it means anyone can be ruined the moment they become inconvenient. Camille paused. You're not just doing this for her. Brandon didn't respond. Because she was right, this wasn't just about Allison. This was about every founder, every partner who trusted the system only to get crushed by it. They started with silence. No lawsuits. No press. Just a slow, quiet burn through paper trails and metadata. Brandon's team cross-checked the dates of Darren's statements with emails Allison had never sent. They uncovered a second offshore account used by the VC executive who had signed the shady wire transfer. And then, a breakthrough. One of the shell firms had dissolved, bad bookkeeping. But its final tax filings included a scanned PDF of a contract. On the bottom of that contract, a familiar signature. Not Allison's. Hers had been cut and pasted. The original belonged to a former CFO who now lived in France. And he was willing to talk. Brandon met Allison again, this time in a quiet co-working loft he rented for her in San Jose. She looked stunned when she walked in. You didn't have to do this, she whispered. I did, Brandon said. Because you were right. He showed her the folder. The PDF. The email chains. Her hands trembled as she flipped through page after page of evidence she'd suspected but could never access. She closed the folder and looked up at him, eyes wet but determined. You're not doing this out of guilt, are you? No, he said. I'm doing it because I still believe you were one of the brightest minds I ever knew. And because if someone like you can be erased, what does that say about the rest of us? She looked away, but not before he saw the gratitude in her face. Then she opened her journal and turned to a page she hadn't shown him before. There's something else. She slid it across. A list of meetings, informal gatherings, one-on-ones, calls late at night. Darren had met with the VC, the media strategist, and others well before the so-called fallout. He knew, she said. This was planned. Brandon nodded. And now? We're going to unplan it. Word spread slowly at first, just whispers in the industry, then murmurs in private Slack channels. A few blogs picked up chatter about Brandon Kingston digging into a forgotten startup scandal. Most dismissed it as tabloid fodder. But insiders felt the tremor. Then Brandon moved. He filed a lawsuit. Not on Allison's behalf, but on his own. He claimed investor fraud, citing the same VC who had once backed him, accusing the man of knowingly falsifying data and manipulating early-stage startups to protect high-risk assets. That lawsuit cracked the dam. Suddenly, documents long buried surfaced. One leaked contract revealed Darren had quietly received a $3 million exit advisory payment, funded by the same media strategist who buried Allison. A settlement agreement had silenced former employees who questioned internal transfers. Now they were speaking. Anonymous interviews began pouring into legal affidavits. He said she was emotionally unstable. She wasn't allowed in key meetings after the funding round. They created a backup cap table without her knowledge. Brandon coordinated with investigative journalists at a major publication. The story hit the front page. Techstars' fall was orchestrated, how a VC, a partner, and a media machine took down a founder. Social media lit up. LinkedIn posts, think pieces, hashtag threads. Hashtag Justice for Allison trended for 2 days. And then the real reckoning began. Darren's current firm issued a statement severing ties, pending further investigation. The VC executive stepped down to focus on family. And the advisory firms? Subpoenas followed. Brandon watched it all unfold from his glass office. But he wasn't celebrating. He was waiting. Because Allison hadn't said a word publicly. And that silence, he knew, wasn't weakness. It was precision. The first time she stepped onto a stage again was unannounced. A small Women in Tech panel in Oakland. Maybe 60 people. No cameras. No press. Just quiet, curious faces. I'm not here for revenge, Allison began. I'm here to talk about power, and what happens when people believe you're no longer useful to their version of success. The room was silent. When the people at the top decide you're a threat, they won't always come at you directly. They'll let your reputation bleed slowly. And the worst part? They'll pretend to care while they do it. Someone in the back stood and clapped. Then more followed. Brandon, sitting off to the side, felt his chest tighten. This wasn't about fixing her past anymore. It was about reclaiming her name. A week after the panel, Brandon received a call from a private number. It was Darren. You just couldn't leave it alone, could you? Darren said. His voice, once smooth and magnetic, now held an edge, like a man who had lost control of a chessboard he built. Brandon didn't flinch. You built your success on her ruin. You made it personal. She believed in me. And I delivered, for both of us. No, Brandon said sharply. You delivered for yourself. You fed her to the wolves and played the victim. But now? She's not the one hiding. There was a long silence. Then Darren muttered, you don't understand the cost of going against people like this. These men built the valley. They can erase more than reputations. They already tried. And they failed. You should be worried, Darren. Not about me. About what comes next. What came next was more than anyone expected. The state opened a formal investigation into the VC firm. Whistleblowers emerged, some anonymously, some bravely public. A former junior associate testified that Allison's removal had been planned during a closed retreat in Aspen, months before the financial audit. The documents from Brandon's team formed the backbone of the case, but it was Allison's journal, the meticulous, time-stamped, handwritten record, that sealed it. Still, Allison declined the press tours. Declined the panel invites. Declined the Netflix docuseries. She didn't want a comeback. She wanted a choice. And that choice was found in a quiet coastal town north of Monterey. Brandon visited her 3 months later. He stepped into a community center and watched from the doorway as Allison stood in front of a room full of teenagers, black girls, Latina girls, and a few white ones too, teaching them how to code an app from scratch. She wore jeans and a hoodie. Hair loose. Face unburdened. When the class ended, she noticed him, smiled. "You found me." He nodded. "I wanted to see it with my own eyes." "You, here. Free." She walked up, wiping chalk from her fingers. "Funny, isn't it? All those years we spent trying to be seen. Now I get more peace from being invisible." Brandon smiled. "You're not invisible. You're intentional." They sat on a bench facing the ocean, the sun dipping behind gentle waves. "You could have taken your platform back," he said quietly. "Gone back to the top." "I don't want the top," she said. "I want to build something that won't be burned down just because someone's afraid of who's standing beside me." He nodded. "I'm not angry anymore, Brandon. I'm clean." The wind blew soft through the cypress trees. And he knew, she didn't need justice. She had already found her peace. Brandon left Monterey changed. Not because of the lawsuits. Not because of the headlines or the boardrooms that now eyed him warily. But because of what he saw in Allison, survival without bitterness, victory without applause. In the weeks that followed, he quietly funded Allison's community center under a private foundation. He never told anyone. Neither did she. She expanded her program, more laptops, more kids, and eventually, satellite hubs in Oakland and South Central LA. She hired instructors who had stories like hers, women from tech who'd been silenced, minimized, or chewed up by the machine and left behind. They weren't interested in revenge. They were building a new future, one code block at a time. Meanwhile, Darren Sharp. His empire crumbled. Lawsuits mounted, investors bailed, and the truth followed him like a shadow he could never outrun. Interviews dried up. Apologies were issued, but none from his own mouth. The VC titan who orchestrated the downfall resigned from 5 boards, quietly sold his holdings, and vanished into early retirement. But the damage to the system was already done. People had seen behind the curtain. And what they saw couldn't be unseen. 1 year later, Brandon attended a gala hosted by a tech nonprofit. He wasn't on the program, but he recognized one of the keynote speakers instantly. Allison walked on stage, hair in soft curls, wearing a simple navy dress. She stood taller now, not just in posture, but in presence. "I'm not here because I was wronged," she began. "I'm here because someone believed in the truth enough to fight for it, even when it wasn't his fight." Her eyes briefly scanned the audience, stopping for a fraction of a second on Brandon. "And for that, I'm grateful. But let me be clear, this isn't about going back. It's about building forward. And if we're going to build a future that's just and inclusive, we must first dismantle the comfort of silence." The room erupted in applause. Brandon smiled, not because of the recognition, but because she no longer needed anyone's permission to be whole. Sometimes, the justice we seek isn't about punishing the past, but about resurrecting what was buried beneath it. Allison Young was never the villain. She was the target. And thanks to one old friend who stopped to listen, the truth came roaring back to life. Remember, the real power doesn't lie in revenge, it lies in the rebuild. If this story moved you, subscribe to True Echo. Drop your city in the comments, we want to know where this truth echoes next. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Justice is possible. But it starts with us.